I've been studying Cambridge for a few years now in history and politics, so I've got a solid understanding of how these questions work, and what makes a good essay more broadly, what makes a nuanced essay, what sort of sophistication should go into essays, and how to write a strong one, especially as you may not know this yourself. So without further ado, let's get stuck into today's session, which we will be, as I mentioned, is focusing on readings and content. So feel free to check out the previous session if you are not all that familiar with the question at hand. As a reminder from last session, here is our question. Does winning a free and fair election automatically confer a mandate for governing? So first thing to mention here is that historical arguments are clear, tangible, don't need abstract speculation. Some of the theories of the present surrounding this question can be quite difficult and hard to digest. Especially for the junior level, you're not necessarily required to engage with the, up-to-date, cutting-edge literature, as you may be required in the senior. So historical examples are a really powerful way in which we can demonstrate physical examples. We can give evidence to back up our judgments and our assertions throughout the essay. So excuse me, my camera is just turned off. I know, I think we're okay. So we're going to talk today about a couple of examples. Specifically, we're going to talk about the French Revolution. And then if there's time, we're going to move on to Nazi, Weimar Germany, as we touched on in the previous session. Two very good examples of testing this thesis. Does free and fair election mean we have a mandate for power? Does the system work? Does it work in theory? And does it work in the sense of the examples demonstrate it works? So the first thing to clarify is this first element of the question. To remind ourselves, free and fair election. What does this look like? What is an election? Because this allows us to consider, is this legitimate? Is this something we take for granted? We often think about democratic elections as the best form of government. But actually, history would demonstrate this isn't always the case. I'll explain why. So an election is a decision-making process designed to allow for citizens to pass judgment on their will for who should run the government. Democratic elections are those whereby the majority voted party is elected into government. Quite simple. A true democracy in its fullest form rarely exists. It encompasses everyone. In many regimes, this still isn't always the case. There's qualifications, there's gendered systems. In Britain, for instance, it wasn't until 1928 with the representation of the People's Act that men and women were both able to vote on the same terms. It was much later in other countries, and as I said, it still remains unequal today in many countries. What often property qualification in the past, a citizen had to be at a certain level of wealth to be able to vote. So true democracy is still relatively hard to come by because it also requires a complete lack of bribery, corruption, misinformation, all features which we simply cannot get out of our society in the present. So a true democracy is never going to be completely achieved, and a truly free and fair election is impossible to attain really in our own society. So that's the first thing to consider when we're thinking about whether they actually confer a mandate. How much authority does an election really have?